subtle corporate messaging suggests you may be celebrating some significant anniversary later this year, Gary. We might come to that in a moment. But maybe we can start, maybe we'll touch on it just briefly because we have other things to cover and I want to think more of the medium to longer term for the airline. But obviously, right now, you're being faced with a problem you could do without, I guess, related to the aviation fuel. Unfortunately, it's led to some cancellation of domestic services. We know the international services are working fine because a lot of people have come to this conference on them. Perhaps you could just give us a sense of the challenge that you're currently facing with aviation fuel and what do you think the outcome might be in the short term?
Sure. Thanks, Andrew. And look, thanks for the opportunity to come and represent an iconic PNG brand as in Air Niugini, very much the nation's airline. And look, I'd first like to pay respect and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands with which Air Niugini serves, both past, both among us, and both those who helped to shape our future. So the fuel situation. Look, I don't think it's certainly not a challenge that we've just stumbled across. It's been on our radar now for a couple of years. Puma Energy, like several of our critical suppliers, are essential to our operations, both domestic and international services. Puma have got some issues at the moment with their supply of foreign exchange and the need to maintain the integrity of compliance. I leave it to them to comment and resolve those. Suffice it to say, it does present some unique challenges and issues to our operation. We continue to monitor that. We continue to build appropriate contingency within our operations so that if there is a challenge, as we faced on the eve of the arrival of the French president, then we adjust our operations accordingly. That day, we cancelled 50 flights. It cost us 1.7 million kina. We disrupted the lives of 2,500 travellers, something that I take very much to heart and certainly apologise profusely for that inconvenience, for something that was ultimately beyond our control. So again, we continue to monitor that situation closely. The state of emergency, the proclamation on essential services by the Minister for Petroleum and Energy allows the government to take action accordingly, and that's seen a number of roundtable discussions involving the various stakeholders, of which we are one, and we contribute appropriately given the consequences that could come. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, interesting challenge, probably don't want to have. There's another challenge which I guess you're meeting head on and there is substantial progress on, which is the challenge of meeting the needs of your current fleet. Obviously, Air Niugini's fleet, like a lot of airline fleets around the world, has needed to be upgraded and updated. And I guess you're approaching it in a couple of different ways. Perhaps you talk about, first of all, the near term, the immediate activity you're taking to make sure that you've got your planes in the air and you can meet the needs of current demand.
Sure. Look, the solution is not as straightforward as say, the problem. Fleet is probably 20% of the solution. 60% is the company, the people. There's the technology, the innovation, the capacity, the tools to do the job. So we must address all of those in order to provide some integrity to our domestic and international schedule. We operate 63, 65 flights on average a day. That's been cut back 4 times since December of last year. We've done that primarily because of the availability of fleet, the productivity of our aircraft. We have 23 revenue aircraft. When I came into the business on the 1st of March, we had just under 50% serviceable, trying to deliver a schedule that required 75% serviceable fleet. The consequence then is delay, disruption, cancellation. And I should point out that that the 1,732 men and women, dedicated men and women of Air Niugini, don't wake up each morning and try to work out ways in which to disrupt our very loyal customers. All of them diligently come to work at some very early hours of the morning and leaving very late at night in order to get our passengers from A to B safely, competently, and appropriately. And they do that very well. For 90% of our operations, 10% result in cancellation. It's about average at the moment. It's appalling, I must admit, the cancellation rate. Our on-time performance is roughly 50 to 60%. And the exception is sort of 90%, which we had 2 days last week. The norm is, yes, 50 to 60%. So half of the flights that we launch are leaving beyond 15 minutes or more, in some instances 3 or 4 hours. What causes that largely is the serviceability of fleet systems and even crew. We were going through the numbers the other day, and in order to deliver the current schedule, we needed 3 more F-100 captains, we needed 4 more 767 captains, and so on. And why are we in that situation? Well, it's because as they retired, the age of 65, they weren't replaced. And you ask the question, well, why didn't you put plans in place? Surely you would have known they were reaching the age of 65 sometime in the past, and consequently nothing was done. But the airline had just come through quite a traumatic period, as most airlines had. COVID decimated the tourism, travel, and hospitality industries. 160 million jobs lost worldwide. Airlines disappeared. Supply chains disappeared. Air Niugini continued to serve Papua New Guinea when everyone else left. Everyone else grounded their fleet, and New Guinea continued to serve under often trying and difficult circumstances. So what are we doing to try and overcome those delays and disruptions, which do cost us money as well? So it's in our best interest to do the right thing each and every day. Well, we're investing in our staff. We're investing in training and development. We've a budget of 40 million kina over the next 12 months, which we are, and that's not just tech crew training, simulators, slides and doors and so on. That's in addition. That's our leadership and skills development, succession planning. That's our customer service. In fact, there's a customer service program going on right now, and that's all our front-facing staff from cabin through to check-in. And some of these team members who have been with the company for a decade have never had appropriate, formal customer service training, as you and I would probably recognize. And so they're getting those tools to be able to handle situations which are outside of their normal SOP. We're employing innovation and technology as well. So some of you who have gone through domestic terminals in Australia or Europe and the US will be used to those kiosks where you can have contactless points. Now, I'm not saying we're going to throw a load of those around the domestic ports in PNG, but we are going to use some of those concepts and technology to be able to speed through the check-in processes to make that, I suppose, point of getting your ticket to the point of boarding the aircraft and leaving the aircraft a little bit more seamless. We are as well as our people and our culture and our structure, we're also then investing in fleet. 2 phases of that. It's quite an interesting but very involved program of work. We have an interim fleet program, and we have a longer-term, medium to longer-term plan. All of it is expensive. All of it is very costly. And at this stage, I am incredibly thankful to a very supportive shareholder and stakeholder, and not in KCH, but the government of Papua New Guinea, because the numbers that we are talking about are often mind-boggling. over the course of the next 6 months, we have 8 aircraft joining our fleet. We have 2 more 737 next generation aircraft joining the existing one that we have. The first one we already have. The second one arrives the beginning of next month, and the third one arrives in early 2024. We have 6 Q400 aircraft, 4 that will be joining before the end of this year. We're bringing in 1 a month. The Q400 is a turboprop aircraft that's used predominantly to service our smaller airstrips. That said, we've been also using it in some of our larger operations because of the restrictions that we have on infrastructure, runways, and
yes.
so on, which we'll no doubt touch on in a bit. All of those aircraft are second-hand. And all of those aircraft are challenging to come about because the global aviation industry is all reaching out.
Everyone wants planes at the moment.
Absolutely. And Qantas is no different than us. They're wet leasing from Finnair. They're wet leasing from Alliance. Virgin are wet leasing as well. We have another Boeing 767 joining our fleet. I learned a very valuable lesson in June there when you have your entire international service pinned on 2 767 aircraft. Loyal but aging. We have a third one that arrives the beginning of September, and that will be on a wet lease arrangement until early next year. So we'll have 3 767 aircraft serving international. We have 3 737. So you can see this picture of the interim fleet arrangements really adding productivity to and seats to sell. And I suppose the big question then is, well, are you going to be able to fill seats? Well, our international load factors for the last 2 months have been in around 95 to 98%, which is why it was utterly painful in the back end of June when both 767 aircraft became unserviceable. And I think I knew about it the moment that it happened because there was 180 passengers in Brisbane waiting to board PX4 back home. And they simultaneously let me all know that the aircraft was not working. So two-way communication is not an issue. But suffice it to say, we do need to get a little bit more capacity in there, but we have to do it in a way in which we optimize use. We can't have aircraft sitting as monuments on tarmac because that will cost us money.
Will there be any changes to the frequency of routes or the routes you fly just as a result of this near-term influx of aircraft?
Additional fleet allows us to explore not only the expansion of the network from a reach perspective, but also from a frequency perspective. So we had, as a result of reduced aircraft availability, reduced the number of services to Sydney. With the addition of 2 more 737s, we'll be able to increase that. We're looking at 2, possibly 3 flights per week, direct Port Moresby, Sydney. We're looking at ways in which we can expand our Manila operation PX10 from Port Moresby to use not a 737 but a 767. We have an initiative at the moment which is supported by the government of Australia to expand services across the Pacific, and that's a flight that goes Brisbane, Port Moresby to Palau. Using a 767 aircraft. We're looking at ways in which we can expand that. Now, Palau is a fantastic tourism destination, as is PNG, and looking at ways in which we can expand those services a bit more. So, yeah, more fleet allows us to explore opportunities to increase networks, but not only international, also domestic. We are very conscious of some of the speakers here today and yesterday in terms of the project development that we've got coming on the horizon. And so a reliable, consistent and frequent service between Port Moresby and Lae, possibly even an hourly service will be possible with more 737s. And a point that I should probably stress as well, one of the easiest ways to improve our productivity is not necessarily bringing in more aircraft, but getting the existing stuff working.
Yeah.
And we've spent a lot of time and effort with our 145, our maintenance facilities. We've recruited 35 new licensed engineers and AMEs, aircraft maintenance engineers, and improved our productivity. So the other day, and I don't want to have to touch some wood here, we had 7 Fokker aircraft flying. We've not had 7 Fokker aircraft flying, I think, since before COVID, and 7 Dash aircraft. We had 15 domestic aircraft, including the 737, servicing the network. We had no cancellations, and we had 92% on-time performance. And a lot of us stared at the metrics going, yeah, it's probably a mistake or something. And sure, no, it wasn't. It was
real.
We had a really good day. Of course, the telephone was silent, which in this business, very much like banking, is a good thing.
Yeah.
So,
Looking further down the track, and you mentioned eye-watering sums, the vision and the decision has already been made by government. Air Niugini is going to get brand new planes and some pretty modern planes too. Maybe you take us through some of the acquisitions you're expecting to make on behalf of the airline.
Sure. Yeah, very exciting. It's the part of the job where you say, so there are elements of the job which are good. There are elements of the job which are great. This is one of the ones that is great. In so much that we have a government and a team that are prepared to get behind the longer term future of this airline. They don't want to just see us as servicing a schedule for the next couple of years with second-hand aircraft and all of the interesting challenges that comes with that. So the strategy to go to market and look for appropriate equipment to meet Air Niugini's 15-year horizon was quite an audacious and adventurous big step. So we've had an arrangement with Boeing since 2006. We were a launch partner for the Dreamliner. That position changed in 2014, where we novated the agreement to 4 737 MAX 8 aircraft, which are a narrow-body 737. Earlier this year, we converted that back. Air Niugini has a remarkable wide-body requirement, not only for freight, but also for passengers. From Brisbane to Port Moresby each day, we move 2.5 tons of freight for octet. You can't do that in a 737 belly, so we must invest in our future. So I was really happy with the support to sign the 87s up again, powered by fantastic Rolls-Royce Trent engines, which allow us to move from Brisbane to Port Moresby using 35% less fuel. It's a carbon composite aircraft. It's an excellent leap for Air Niugini towards a more sustainable future, and certainly contributing to PNG's net targets for the next 3 decades. These aircraft will not only allow us to underpin the current schedule, but they will allow us to stretch beyond the 787 in comparison to the 76, which is a fantastic machine. But the 78 allows us to go 3,000 or 4,000 kilometers further, carrying more passengers and more freight. So it allows us to look at a network that goes beyond Singapore and Hong Kong, Brisbane and Sydney. Not that these aren't fantastic destinations, but we can potentially now look at a viable Port Moresby, Shanghai, Port Moresby, Beijing, Port Moresby, Melbourne, Auckland, even Los Angeles. We were looking at that one the other day. That was rather exciting. So, Not an incredible dream either, if you think about it, because as we saw from the presentation yesterday from Terra and ExxonMobil, the timeline of program activity for the LNG projects would suggest that an aircraft that could fly West Coast US to Port Moresby direct in 2026, which is when our aircraft will arrive, is probably a good thing to have. Now, maybe 2 might not be enough, so I might have to talk to Boeing about 3 or 4, which would be an interesting chat to have.
So you mentioned 2006 for the Dreamliner? 16, sorry.
Sorry, 26.
26, yes.
26.
We're in the same decade now.
Yep.
But that's not the only aircraft. The airline is also looking at a smaller aircraft as well.
Yeah. So 13 aircraft in total, which is 65% of our fleet. Not too many airlines in the world would say that they would take that on, but we need to. The average age of the current fleet is between 25 and 30 years. And that doesn't mean that our aircraft are unsafe. That means that our aircraft are aging, and some of them are getting to the point of being commercially unviable to operate, because the spares are hard to find on an aircraft.
And so
Yeah, some of our Fokkers were last made. They made the Fokker 70 in 1998. I think that was the last one that rolled off the assembly line. And so we need to replace our regional fleet in the distant future. Alliance are keeping their Fokkers running until 2030. It's a great aircraft. I mean, I think everyone has a little place in their heart. I love them when they're flying. They make us around 60 to 70 million kina a year, but they're very temperamental. And over the last 2 months, I think our better one of the lot, would have operated 50 days out of 61, which is not great productivity. So we do have to replace them. And so the team have been working over the last couple of years on an appropriate regional jet, and they had narrowed it down to Embraer, the Embraer E2-195, which is 120-seat thereabout aircraft, and the Airbus A220, 100 and 300 series. There is a press conference on Tuesday. I can't take away any
no big
thunder.
reveal here? No exclusive for the conference?
No, I'll probably get into trouble from. But suffice it to say, the aircraft that we've picked will not only allow us to replace the Fokker 70, Fokker 100 appropriately to deliver its domestic network, again using up to 28% less fuel between Port Moresby and Lae and Hagen and so on, but will also allow us to deliver a narrow-body service between Port Moresby and Singapore or Port Moresby and Hong Kong. The reason why that's important is because these aircraft are all going to cost us around about $37 million a piece. So we can no longer afford to have an aircraft parked from 5 p.m. at night until 5 a.m. in the morning, which is what we currently have. The majority of our aircraft, you can see them on the tarmac 5, 6 o'clock at night because they don't normally work beyond the twilight hour. So I need a platform that we can operate pretty much around the clock. So it will do 2 or 3 flights a day to Hagen, or 3 or 4 flights a day to Lae, and then go over to Manila, go over to Hong Kong, go to Singapore, go down to Auckland. The 220 will even go from Port Moresby to Melbourne quite comfortably. And if anybody's had the opportunity to go on either the Embraer or the 220, this next generation of aircraft with the wide windows, the nice legroom, the carbon fiber seats, they're incredibly comfortable. Even the overhead bin arrangements now give you that extra height to make you feel like you're in a bigger aircraft. Notwithstanding then the fuel efficiencies and performance of these aircraft. We're going from analog to digital, from 2G to 5G in one leap, and it's incredibly exciting. But yeah, they've got a price tag. Yeah.
One of the things I'm sure everyone who travels frequently with Air Niugini would like to know is what are the prospects, therefore, with maybe more efficient services of making some of the flights a little bit cheaper? You think it'll have an impact on pricing?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that because, of course, everyone wants, I want no delays, I want no cancellations, I want my flight to leave on time, I want to be in a comfortable new jet, and I want the Wi-Fi to work. I want Wi-Fi, actually, let alone work. And we want cheaper airfares. An aircraft that can carry 20 to 30 more people, can carry 20% more freight, and can do it for 30% less money, will present appropriate savings which the airline can pass on to the customer in form of a greater spread of airfares. I think that's what we're seeing, not only within Air Niugini, but also for those of you who have tried to book a flight on Emirates or SQ or QF, the flight prices are up there. They're 30 to 40% higher than they were, say, pre-COVID. And a lot of that is to do with inventory available and demand that the airlines all face, which is then driving wet lease arrangements. The wet lease people are having a heyday. There isn't enough demand to meet supply, so our airfares, the cheaper ones, are being bought very quickly, and then the more expensive ones are the ones that tend to remain. And so the impression that everyone then gets is that airfares are more expensive. And look, the cost of delivery as well is more expensive. I mean, fuel prices have always been dynamic, but I mentioned those supply chains that no longer exist. So there's only one workshop in the world that we can send our Rolls-Royce Tay engines to get an overhaul. One, it's in Dallas. An overhaul costs us $350,000 US, give or take. And shipping the thing over there and then shipping it back and having the aircraft sitting on the ground waiting, all of those costs marry up. The costs of crew training have increased, the costs of pilots and cabin crew have all increased because COVID decimated the resource pool.
Yes.
And then as airlines have attempted to re-engage, there's some crazy stuff happening in the industry. If you look at India, for example, between Indigo and Air India, there's 1,000 jet orders just there in the last 3 months. 1,000. I only want 13. But they've got 1,000 spread between Boeing and Airbus.
Huge.
Qantas have just ordered a stack of Airbuses, 29 A220s. Airbus themselves have got 8,000 orders of narrow-body jets outstanding, which they're looking to fill. So the challenge is to try and put downward pressure on airfares in an industry where everything has become a little bit more expensive. And I haven't even begun to talk about the cost of capital.
Yes.
So, yeah.
There's a couple of comments I wouldn't mind you having before we get on to the anniversary, which is coming up in November this year. We're going to hear from Eric Mosman from the PNG Tourism Promotion Authority. He'll be our next speaker. Obviously, Air Niugini plays a very important role in promoting the tourism sector domestically and internationally. How are you starting to see that tourism traffic return on your network, and what do you see the prospects for growth on that are?
Well, look, I would love to see it accelerate. I'm a massive fan of tourism in PNG. I've spent most of my life there, 26 years in country. My family have been associated with PNG for 40 years. I've been fortunate to travel the length and breadth of the country. We were talking a lot about it last night. I'm a massive fan. But it's less than 1% of GDP, tourism in PNG. And obviously COVID took a lot of the wind out of folks' sails. Air Niugini is prepared to get behind any initiatives that help to promote. We're supporting the PNG Dive Association as they go and represent their various provinces and facilities at these events. I'm a big fan of Eric and his team. I encourage, we've got quite a contingent here of Air Niugini staff in order to promote not only our service, but also the destinations domestic that we travel to. I've had numerous chats with Minister Leonard about how we can align services to festivals, because festivals are a massive draw card for tourists. We're seeing some steady growth, but and I think a lot of that's to do with the fact that COVID locked so many people down. So adventure tourism is, I don't want to go to Bali, I don't want to go to Fiji, I want to go and see something a bit different. So that's certainly what we can provide, and a lot of us travel around PNG for work, and we don't do the tourism piece. I brought my family into the country over New Year's, and we went up to Kokopo and we did the dolphins. I walked up the volcano. I did the tunnels. I went to Yamamoto's bunker. Fantastic. It was just brilliant, and I've lived in country for 25 years, so there are gems worth discovering, and if anything, COVID helped to bring some of that out in terms of domestic tourism.
Of course, the successful aviation sector doesn't rely just on aircraft or people, but also infrastructure. And I guess we're starting to see some investment in the airports infrastructure in PNG, supported in part by the cadet program, which is being put through the National Airports Corporation, funded by the Asian Development Bank. What would you say are the highlights or the things you're most excited about as far as the actual airport infrastructure development in PNG?
There's no doubt there's been substantial investment in infrastructure, and we can't fly and land at an airstrip unless it's long enough and strong enough. The 737-800 that we've got can only travel to 5 ports outside of Port Moresby: Manhagan, Lae, Guinea and Alatau, Kavieng and Manus. We need the aircraft to be able to travel to Kokopo. We need to go to Madang. We need to go to Wewak. We need to go to Hoskins. We need to be able to go to these places because airfares you were talking about, and also the fact that the people want to be able to travel on a bigger aircraft. There's more demand, and so we need to be able to service that with one aircraft, not 2.
Yes.
So it is important to certainly build the infrastructure in terms of terminals, and if you've been to Lae recently, there's a spectacular domestic international terminal building that's been constructed with the assistance of JICA. There are 2 air bridges. There's a beautiful departure lounge. There's the check-in area. It's almost, when you walk through it, it's like you're going through Cairns and Brisbane almost in terms of the aspects and the view. Lae is all the hallmarks of an international airport. With the advent of our new regional jet, there's no reason why you couldn't have a Port Moresby Lae Manila service, or even a Lae Hong Kong or other Asians, or even down to sort of Brisbane, Sydney, Auckland. Yep. It all relies on that infrastructure. On the reverse, then, if you don't have it, or if it's failing in some way, it will restrict our ability to service that strip. Over Easter, massive disruption caused because of the repairs that were required in Mount Hagen, and we were restricted to Q300 and Q400 aircraft that they themselves had payload restrictions. So we were taking off with 55 passengers on average in a Q400, and sometimes leaving baggage behind just because of the weight restrictions caused by the runway. I took a lot of flack over that, and it is what it is. I don't expect passengers to suddenly discriminate in which services or which agencies are responsible for what. They buy a ticket from Air Niugini, they expect the service from Air Niugini. But these are the various elements that all feed in to being able to deliver a safe and competent service.
Gary, we're running towards the end of our conversation. Thank you so much for answering all my questions so far. As the video we played at the beginning intimated and gave us a little taste of the branding that's going to be associated with your 50th anniversary celebrations in November. Obviously, you don't want to do the big reveal now, but what kind of celebration have you got in mind for us come November the 1st, which is the 50th anniversary of Air Niugini's founding?
Sure. Look, it's a tremendous milestone. You know, our golden jubilee, our golden anniversary, 50 years of aviation in Papua New Guinea. As you saw from some of the photos there, I noticed one of them was a very slim chief operating officer of ours, Captain Granger Narara. He had a lot of hair in that picture as well. But so suffice to say, and probably a lot of you in the room who have flown with Air Niugini or grown up with Air Niugini, a lot of that was a bit of a walk down memory lane. But you know, the reality is that over the last year or two, and including COVID, you know, it's been a very challenging and difficult time for the industry, for the airline. And although I want to, you know, celebrate the achievement of 50 years, I challenged the team to say, well, rather than, you know, clinking glasses at a black tie event, what can we give back? What can we give back to our very loyal customer base who have stood by us thick and thin? Some of that standing for 8 or 9 hours in a terminal. You know, what value can we give back in the form of ticket prices and all of the other services that we offer? And so November 1 is our actual birthday, and so there are a lot of initiatives. The team have got some great concepts and activities that are happening over the course of those the lead up and then the lead to the end of the year, which will help us to really ring in that 50 years. Yeah, lots of what they call Easter eggs and things like that around the place, but certainly the team themselves. I'm incredibly privileged to sit in a seat that's had a number of fantastic individuals there. I'm incredibly privileged to work with a very dedicated and hardworking team of people at the helm of a very iconic part of PNG. And so to celebrate 50 years of that is a fantastic opportunity, and we want to make sure that we do it right, and we want to make sure that we do it well.
Gary, with that, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Will you please thank Gary?
Thank you.
And I should say, and I'm sure it's fine to mention, the 50th anniversary edition of Paradise magazine, which is the in-flight magazine that is on Air Niugini's planes, is in preparation at the moment. If you haven't already made your bookings to put your messages into that issue, I believe it closes on the 24th of August, so the 24th of this month. So there's still time if you want to participate in that issue. There was also an important task, I believe, of doing a draw, Gary. So those of you who have brought your business cards to the Air Niugini stand, what are they winning, Gary? I think they're winning something rather nice.
It is. It's I believe it's two business class return airfares on our network. So it's both domestic and international. So that's either a Port Moresby to Singapore, or a Brisbane to Port Moresby, or a Port Moresby to Lae. Oh, actually, well, who would you like to get rather than me? Or you want to come out this way?
Just come in the middle.
There you go.
I'll do it, so that's all above board. Yep. I think I've put about 50 of my own cards into here.
Have you?
Okay, so good luck to the lucky recipient. Let's mix it up all the way into the bottom. I'm going to be blind.
I was going to say.
There you go.
All right, I recognize that logo. That's a Swire ship. Get me my glasses.
I've got your glasses.
Oh, there you go. Right. Okay. So it's Swire Shipping. It's a DT Kilnani, Commercial Manager, Mining and Resources from Sydney. So Sydney, so we do have a Sydney to Moresby service as well. So congratulations, and you see the team at the Air Niugini booth outside. They'll sort you out. Oh, is it you? Oh, come on. Oh, well, here we go. Yep, come on stage. All right, thank you.
Is it smart?
Oh, there we go.